It had been a day of hurrying. Katie found out that when you try to help Dad gather up his work things, you'd better tell him what you have or he'll waste time looking for it. Orbie learned that clocks don't run forever, and they both found out that it was very important to get to the office on time. Between munches of his toast as he whirled out the front door, Dad told Katie and Orbie his alarm clock had stopped working. They would have to go to a clock shop for a new one after work. Now, Katie and Orbie, who just loved adventures, weren't actually keen on this one. A clock shop didn't sound very exciting. They played hall bowling, helped Mom cut cookies, finger-painted the patio stones, and passed the day doing all kinds of great things. In fact, the day disappeared in a minute. It was so much fun. When Dad opened the door, he was eager to get to the clock shop so he wouldn't have another late morning. Katie and Orbie walked hand in hand with Dad. They told him hall bowling was hard. They had to rearrange the pins in a straight line to hit them. Dad smiled. Orbie sighed. In fact, he wished he were hall bowling right now. Dad noticed that Orbie wasn't too excited about clock shopping. Orbie burbled it was just that a clock was a clock, and he really wished they were doing, well, almost anything else. Dad asked Orbie how he knew it wouldn't be fun. He'd never been to a clock shop before. Katie leaned around Dad and looked at Orbie. He shrugged at her. He had no idea what could be fun about it. Dad pointed to a building. There was a tiny clock shop tucked away at the back. Dad opened the small door leading into the shop. The two friends walked in. Looking around, Katie knew this would be fun, but Orbie was hoping that it wouldn't take very long. At that moment, he didn't even notice that the whole place was ticking. Just then, a clerk asked if she could help them. As Dad began to explain, Orbie looked up and burbled that if clocks were just clocks, there sure were a whole lot of different kinds. He could hardly believe his eyes. And then he could hardly believe his ears when the clock on the counter announced,
"It is 4:30 p.m.
Katie gawked at Orbie in disbelief. It was a talking clock. While Dad looked at alarm clocks, the clerk told Orbie this was for someone who couldn't see. The person only needed to touch the clock, and it would tell the time. Katie and Orbie were very impressed. Above it, a little twirling ballerina came out of a wall clock that chimed musical notes. Katie pointed it out for Orbie, and he liked it too, and spun like the ballerina. Dad placed a hand on his shoulder to remind him it was a place full of precious things. And Orbie smiled at the clerk. Next, he noticed a clock with a man chopping wood as he went around. It chimed as he chopped. Orbie pretended to chop too. The clerk smiled. It was fine with her if he moved around in the open area. Orbie checked with Dad, who nodded. He was holding up a red alarm clock and considering it. Now, right behind Orbie, a clock went cuckoo, cuckoo 4 times. A little bird popped its head out with each cuckoo. Orbie loved it and made cuckoo sounds and crazy faces all around the open space. The clerk laughed out loud. Orbie burbled a question what was hanging down from the cuckoo clock. The clerk told him it was the clock mechanism. She invited the friends over to see how some clocks worked. She brought out a special wall clock that she used to show the working mechanism. It was actually just the inside of the clock without the casing. The casing was the pretty part that goes on the outside of the clock. The clerk asked Orbie to pull the chain gently, and as he did, the friend saw the gears click and turn, and she explained that the chain was winding up the clock. The gears turned. Katie loved how small the clock parts were. The clerk told her that they were even smaller in a watch, of course. She opened up a watch and showed them the teeny tiny gears inside. Nowadays, most watches and clocks ran on batteries, she explained, but in the old days, people wound the clocks with the key or with the chains. And many customers loved the old wind-up kind, so she still had some in the store. Orbie found himself moving back and forth as he listened to the clocks. He realized he was moving to the tick-tock ticking of the clocks. The clock shop had its own rhythm. The clerk said she'd show them some of her favorite clocks, like Old Noisy over there. He would chime the hour. Before Katie and Orbie had time to turn, Old Noisy chimed a loud, heavy chime, and they jumped at the sound. The clerk asked them to count the chimes. Orbie kind of swung back and forth like the pendulum in Old Noisy as they counted, and it chimed 4 more times. The clerk said now they knew what time it was. It was 5 o'clock. Telling the time made Katie and Orbie feel very proud. The clerk told them only 1 clock in the shop told the real time. Orbie snorkeled, "Why?" She explained that if every clock in the place went off at the same time, it would be frightfully loud. This way she could enjoy each one. She pointed to a clock above her. It was her most favorite. Just then, beautiful music called Swan Lake played, and 7 swans glided around the clock. Katie thought it was one of the most beautiful clocks that she had ever seen. Dad purchased a new alarm clock. Orbie was glad it wasn't Old Noisy. They thanked the clerk for showing them everything. She pointed to a jazzy-looking clock on the wall, and she wondered if Orbie wouldn't like to hear this one before he went. The little door opened up, and out came a tiny mechanical man with a trumpet who tooted the hour. He tooted 5 times. Orbie immediately mimed playing a trumpet and waved thank you to the lady. All the way home, they did the tick-tock dance, throwing in swan gliding, and trumpet playing, and cuckoo calling, and everything else they could think of. Katie and Orbie were delighted to have discovered that even though the clock shop sounded boring at first, it was far from it. They never forgot that. And I hope that when you have to do something that seems a little dull, you'll remember the fun Katie and Orbie had. Look for the fun in everything you do.
Are really fast, and some are really slow. A sloth takes time, and a cheetah likes to go. But even if you're fast, and you think you'll win the race, long as you do your best, you'll always be an ace.